Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
In our top story, the Biden administration is pressuring Israel on issues concerning its internal security and politics. The White House has made several comments recently warning Israel against extending sovereignty throughout Judea and Samaria. It has urged restraint in the aftermath of terror attacks and has chimed in on which elected members of Knesset it feels are suitable for certain posts in the new government. Now the Biden administration is demanding that Israel bolster the Palestinian Authority. U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Israel and Palestinian Affairs Hadi Amar recently held a marathon of meetings with Israeli officials and top IDF brass where he urged the Jewish state to strengthen the PA. This comes despite the Palestinian leadership's insistence on indoctrinating Arab youth to violence against Jews in the school system, its continued payment of stipends to the families of terrorists, and its campaign of unilateral moves against Israel in the United Nations. Nonetheless, Washington is pressuring Jerusalem to bolster the failing Palestinian Authority and to advance projects in the community, which is investing every penny into the perpetuation of the conflict and the continued hatred of Jews.
Tough talk from Kevin McCarthy. The California Republican is the frontrunner for the position of Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. He has vowed to remove Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee over her repeated anti-Semitic tirades. Omar has made several troubling anti-Semitic comments since her election in 2018. She accused Israel of hypnotizing the world and even equated the United States and Israel with Hamas and the Taliban. McCarthy said that anti-Semitism is not only spreading on college campuses, but it is growing in the halls of Congress as well. He pledged that if elected as Speaker of the House, he will put an end to the anti-Semitic rhetoric by removing the member of the so-called squad from her committee position.
The United States Central Command has announced that it will deploy 100 unmanned vessels to the Persian Gulf. This comes after an Israeli tanker was targeted by an Iranian suicide drone off the coast of Oman. The Pacific Zircon was struck by a Shahed 136 bomb-carrying UAV launched from an Iranian Air Force Regional Command base. There were no injuries or spillage, but the attack did cause damage to the ship. CENTCOM released a statement saying that the strike against a civilian vessel in the critical maritime strait demonstrates once again the destabilizing nature of Iranian malign activity in the region. It said that Task Force 59 will dispatch a fleet of surface and subsurface vessels to guard the ships in the strategic waters.
The Israeli Navy declared that its new ship-mounted Iron Dome missile defense system is operational. The maritime interceptor, which is known as the Sea Dome, successfully completed a series of tests and demonstrated its capability to protect Israeli interests. The Defense Ministry and the Israeli Navy announced that the system, which is installed aboard Sa'ar 6-class corvette ships, is functional after simulations of real threats proved the Sea Dome's successful detection and interception of targets in challenging scenarios. These new warships, equipped with missile defense technology, are tasked with protecting Israel's shipping lanes, as well as its offshore natural gas rigs in the Mediterranean Sea. Israel's Defense Minister Benny Gantz hailed the success of the new system, saying that it expertly identified threats and successfully destroyed them. The Ministry of Defense added that this marks a significant milestone in enhancing the capabilities of the corvette ships.
The director of the FBI says that Jews in America desperately need more protection. Christopher Wray said that anti-Semitism and the violence that comes out of it is a persistent and present fact. He said that the Jewish community is under attack from all sides, and in response, the FBI is raising the threat of anti-Semitism to a national priority. He noted that Jews make up 2.4% of the American population, but are the target of 63% of religious hate crimes in the United States.
Israeli businessman Itzik Moshe was the target of an assassination attempt by Iran's Quds Force in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. Moshe is a dual Israeli-Georgian citizen. He previously served as a senior Jewish agency representative in Russia, and he uses his connections to advocate for the Jewish state and to improve its international standing. It is his advocacy that made him a target. Georgian security forces acted quickly when they learned that a Pakistani hit squad connected to Iran was gathering intelligence in order to prepare an attack on Moshe. Georgian officials said that in addition to the Pakistani team, 2 Iranian citizens were arrested for supplying weapons to the would-be assassins.
The Palestinians have declared another diplomatic victory at the United Nations after the Third Committee approved a resolution supporting their right to self-determination. The sponsor of the resolution publicly called for a Palestinian state. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation demanded that Israel retreat to the indefensible 1967 borders, which would require the expulsion of thousands of Jews from their homes and would effectively make the entire biblical homeland and all of the major holy sites off limits to Jews and Christians. The passing of this resolution comes just days after the same committee requested that the International Criminal Court investigate Israel for occupying its biblical and historic homeland in Judea and Samaria. Palestinian leaders praised the vote by the UN body. They declared it a victory and vowed to continue stepping up their diplomatic campaign against Israel in the international arena.
Protests against the hardline Islamic regime in Iran have entered their second month despite a bloody government crackdown. Human rights groups report that more than 340 people have been killed, thousands of citizens have been arrested, and dozens have been sentenced to death. Nevertheless, the Iranian opposition seems to be strengthening in the face of this murderous repression. Recent riots claimed the life of a senior member of the Radical Revolutionary Guard Corps. In addition, the ancestral home of the founder of the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khamenei, was set ablaze by anti-regime protesters chanting death to the dictator. Iranian leaders are struggling to contain the uprising and have blamed the United States and Israel for the unrest in the country. The extremist government in Tehran is facing the biggest internal challenge to its authority since it came to power after the Islamic Revolution in 1979.
The Bnei Zion Hospital in Haifa has opened a new center for the treatment of chemical, biological, and atomic warfare. The facility, located in northern Israel, is fortified against missile, chemical, and even nuclear strikes. It holds over 100 treatment beds to ensure that in the event of an attack, hospital staff and patients are protected and able to provide advanced care. Dr. Ari Lamb, CEO of the Bnei Zion organization, said that the medical building is the personification of collective kindness. It represents a commitment by one of Israel's best hospitals to protect those in need, even in the face of terroristic threats.
Azerbaijan has announced that it will become the first Muslim Shiite country to establish an embassy in Israel. Jerusalem has had an embassy in Baku since 1992, and now for the first time the Azeri people will be represented in the Jewish state. Israeli leaders praised the decision and hailed the cooperation between the countries. Interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid said Azerbaijan is an important partner of Israel and home to one of the largest Jewish communities in the Muslim world. He went on to say that this decision reflects the depth of the relationship between the countries, and he added that the move is the result of the Israeli government's efforts to build strong diplomatic bridges with the Muslim world.
Cancer patients in Australia have begun a trial testing Israeli-made nanobot antibodies. This groundbreaking technology, invented by Professor Yanai Ofran from Bar-Ilan University, involves computer-generated antibodies which are programmed to determine if cells surrounding tumors are likely to help or hinder cancer treatment. Ofran said that his AU-007 antibody treatment activates cells that attack tumors. Data collected through artificial intelligence software allows Ofran's team to learn from the antibody's behavior. This will enable them to create new antibodies that will do exactly what they want and opens the door to smarter therapeutics that can execute sophisticated plans to cure disease.
A group of 40 cyclists, many of whom are visually impaired, took part in a ride down the Path of the Patriarchs in Gush Etzion. The bikers from the Sharon Cycling Group, joined by volunteers on tandem bikes, rode along the historic trail that the biblical figures Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their descendants walked. The famous pathway stretches from Hebron, past Bethlehem, to Jerusalem. David Rodman, the head of the Gush Etzion Tourism Division, said it is a pleasure to host riders who visit the area to enjoy the beautiful landscape and stunning views. He went on to say this particular group was exceptionally moving, with Israel at its best on display.
Several antiquities robbers were caught digging illegally near an Ottoman well in the Bedouin city of Rahat. The thieves were reportedly searching for a lost treasure that is rumored to be buried in the area. Members of the Israel Antiquities Authority's Robbery Prevention Unit apprehended the thieves, but not before irreparable damage was done to the site, which contains antiquities from the Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman periods. Elias Cazito, the Director General of the Antiquities Authority, said that they are witnessing an increase in the phenomenon of antiquities thefts in the field.
We are living in mysterious yet miraculous times. We've witnessed the most remarkable fulfillment of biblical prophecy, the Jewish people's return to Israel, and the prosperity and contributions of this tiny country in such a short time. Yet we've also seen an unexpected rise in anti-Semitism, which takes the form of anti-Zionism and alliances between groups that are fighting against the most fundamental biblical values. In the book Titus, Trump, and the Triumph of Israel, Josh Reinstein answers important questions to clarify what has driven political action from the time that the Roman Emperor Titus destroyed Jerusalem until today, when President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Get your copy today and learn how faith-based diplomacy has changed the world. To order your advance copy, go to triumphofisrael.com.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Arsen Ostrovsky. He's the CEO of the International Legal Forum. Arsen, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Josh.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is the International Legal Forum.
The International Legal Forum is an Israel-based NGO that is a global network of some 4,000 lawyers and activists around the world that are committed to standing up for Israel and combating anti-Semitism, delegitimization, terror, and BDS in the international legal arena. Recently, we've been fighting the apartheid lie, we've been standing up for Israel at the UN, and we've been taking on the BDS movement. Really, we're trying to use the law to stand up for Israel and the Jewish people.
While you have no shortage of cases, anti-Semitism has exploded around the world. What are some of the big egregious issues that you've seen in the last few weeks and months?
So you're right. We live in a time and an age where anti-Semitism is rising. This is barely 75 years after the Holocaust, and anti-Semitism across many parts of the world, not just Europe, but in the United States, is at record levels, and that is very, very disturbing. And it comes from all different sides. It comes from the far left, it comes from the far right, and it also comes from the Islamist circles as well. And what we've seen is, on the one hand, not only a resurgence of hardcore anti-Semitism directed against Jews as individuals, as most recently we saw in the Kanye West example, where he said phrases like he's got a called DEFCON 3 against Jews, blaming Jews for all sorts of grievances, really using some very age-old anti-Semitic tropes. But we're also seeing a new kind of anti-Semitism, which is really anti-Zionism disguised as anti-Semitism, where we're seeing, instead of the Jew as the individual being targeted, we're seeing Israel as the collective Jew amongst the nations being targeted. And that, I think, is the far more disconcerting threat that we have to deal with today, because it's far more difficult to pinpoint.
You mentioned Kanye West, and one of the things that's crazy about that whole scenario is that he felt comfortable saying these things. It wasn't even masking it as anti-Zionism or what most traditional anti-Semites do. He's basically saying Jews are controlling the media, they're controlling the message that gets out, they're controlling him, his doctor's trying to kill him. How does someone who's in the public eye feel comfortable saying these things publicly? It's
a good question. I think what we've really seen is this mainstreaming of anti-Semitism, where there was a time when you couldn't say these kinds of things. You would say, I don't have anything against the Jews, it's Israel. Whereas now there's a sense of comfort in mainstreaming where not just celebrities, but other people of influence on campuses feel at ease in saying attacking not only Israel, but in making these gross anti-Semitic tropes and accusations against Jews as individuals because of our race, because of our faith. And what was interesting, I think, when the Kanye example is that he was universally condemned for the anti-Semitic statements that he made, including by celebrities, people in Hollywood, politicians, and many others. But the interesting thing is, had he said instead of Jews, had he referred to Zionists or Israelis, there would have been a different case. And this is something we see day in, day out, and we're fighting to change, is that when people like Kanye or those who seek to engage in anti-Semitism replace the word Jew for Zionist, there is this almost kind of justification or kind of minimizing of the anti-Semitism when it's the exact same Jew hatred. There are no ifs, buts, maybes. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and we have to call both of them out just as vigorously.
Well, I also think there's a bigger problem here, because there was huge condemnation of Kanye. He was kicked out of Adidas. They wouldn't even let him go to Skechers. His music is now banned from Apple Music. But when someone like Ilhan Omar, who's a congresswoman, says, follow the Benjamins and the Jews are controlling things, she has a seat on the Foreign Relations Committee. So why is there a double standard between Kanye and someone like Ilhan Omar?
Absolutely, there is a double standard because when you say something against Jews as individuals, that's universally recognized as an act of anti-Semitism. But when you use Israel as a scapegoat, then that somehow is more acceptable. And it's not. Anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism is anti-Semitism in whichever manifestation, whether it's denial of Jews our equal rights to self-determination, which is Zionism at its core, whether it's attacking Jews as individuals because of our faith in themselves. And just as we condemn Kanye West with full veracity, we have to do exactly the same with the likes of Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and lawmakers who use Israel as an excuse or as a scapegoat to cover their own anti-Semitism and Jew hatred.
We're seeing anti-Semitism become institutionalized. We just saw in the case of Berkeley, they have Jew-free zones or anti-Zionist-free zones, or basically anti-Semitic areas where Jews can't go. How is this even legal in America?
In America, you have the First Amendment right to free speech, where a lot of things are able to get through the threshold because of the sacrosanct right enshrined under the Constitution for free speech, including hate speech. The interesting thing in the case of Berkeley, this bastion of progressive society where groups like the SJP, the Students for Justice in Palestine, a vehemently anti-Semitic, anti-Israel extremist group was born, where the BDS movement thrives. In this particular case that you referred to, what they're trying to say is that even though the reference here is, no Zionists welcome, what they're trying to portray this as incorrectly so and maliciously so is as not a case of anti-Semitism, but rather a issue of First Amendment free speech. Whereas I think the correct interpretation is this is not something about free speech, but it's something about anti-Semitism, because when you reject Zionism, when you deny the Jewish people their right to self-determination that is applied to every other nation and group of people, that is anti-Semitism, full stop. So they have framed this as an argument about free speech, as the fact that as if Zionism is only about a political discourse, whereas Zionism is something that is inherently and intrinsically and indispensably part of our identity as Jews as well. So when you say no Zionists allowed, you may as well be saying no Jews allowed.
We're seeing this also all over the world. It's not just America. In Europe, the rise of anti-Semitism is shocking. It used to be, like you said, death to Zionism. Now they're saying death to the Jews again. Why are we seeing this happen all over the world again? Why is history repeating itself?
It's a good question. If, as the saying goes, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And we are repeating it. Mind you, the only difference today from 75 plus years ago is the fact that we have a strong and vibrant Jewish state with a sovereign army to defend and protect us. That is the main difference. I think that, it's... there are many reasons for this, but I think one of the main ones is perhaps the lack of political willpower. In Europe, for example, especially, it's one thing to say, yes, we support Israel, yes, we support the Jewish people, but when you continue, for example, to write out blank checks to the Palestinian Authority, one of the most, permanent one of the most significant purveyors of anti-Semitism, of Jew hatred, of incitement and libel. That is anti-Semitism. That blood is on their hands as well. So you can't say, I'm against anti-Semitism, but at the same time be funding anti-Semites like the Palestinian Authority, which continue to, for example, write out pay-to-slay checks to murderers of Jews and Israelis.
You mentioned one big difference that we have the State of Israel, but another big difference is that we're not alone. We have our Christian allies around the world. How big do Christians who stand with Israel, how big a role do they play in the fight against anti-Semitism?
Incredible role. I think the Christian Zionist pro-Israel community is one of our biggest, one of our strongest allies, and they play really an indispensable role in standing up for Israel, for the Jewish people, and for the rights of the Jewish people in Israel, in all the territory here. They speak out in parliaments, they attend rallies, they write articles, opinion pieces in the mainstream discussion. So I think they're one of our most crucial allies, and I think it's something we need to only further develop these relationships, certainly from our perspective here in Israel. I think it's a crucial, strategic, long-term relationship.
Arsen, there are literally tens of millions of people watching the show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Israel is under no shortage of challenges. Certainly one of the most foremost is being in the international legal arena. But this is a challenge that we can defeat. We can use the law to stand up for Israel, to fight anti-Semitism, BDS, and terror. But we need to do it together. We need to do it with our allies, with our partners across the world. And we can and we are using the law to effect change.
Thank you, Arsen, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom, and welcome to the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod. I'm Sam Grunberg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod United Israel Appeal, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. Today, you will witness the fulfillment of biblical prophecy through the gathering of the exiles. God bless you from Jerusalem.
אני כל כך קשורה לישראל, שלא משנה איזה תחרות נוסעת קטנה, גדולה, כל פעם שאני רואה דגל ישראל זה עושה לי צמרמורת בגוף. אולימפיאדה זה חלום של כל ספורטאי, אני חושבת. איך שנכנסנו לאולימפיאדה, לכפר האולימפי, ראינו הספורטאים הכי טובים שיש, באמת, כאילו, מכל העולם, אמרנו, וואו, גם אנחנו ביניהם. אין לי מדינה אחרת. זה הבית שלי.
העלייה לישראל היא עוזרת להגשים לי את החלומות שלי, היא עוזרת לממש את השאיפות שלי ואת הפוטנציאל שלי כאומן. למרות שהמשפחה שלי היא משפחה יהודית, עד גיל 14 בערך לא היה לי שמץ של מושג מה זה להיות יהודי, חוץ מזה שזה לא הנושא שכדאי לדבר עליו בקרב החברים ובבית ספר ובמקומות ציבוריים בכלל. לא פחדתי לעלות כי ידעתי שאני לא אהיה לבד. לא פחדתי לעלות כי ידעתי שלמרות שאני עוזב את הבית והמשפחה שלי לא תהיה איתי, אבל יהיה מאחוריי גב.
If you've taken all the messages and all the education that we received, which come as no surprise of my desire to establish and live a life in Israel, I still see myself as an Oleh Hadash or new immigrant. My current role at Bank Leumi, which allows me to act as an ambassador both for the bank and for the State of Israel, makes me feel like I've come full circle. We have a people who, for the past 60 years, despite challenges, despite hardships, despite a war every decade, continue to succeed on an international scale. This is a land of modern-day heroes.
הגעתי מטרנסילבניה, ברומניה הייתי בן 14. כאן ראיתי פעם ראשונה חיבור בראייתי מדהים בין השורשים שלנו, תורת ישראל, עם ישראל וארץ ישראל. כל אחד מכם כאן יכול להגיע, כי נותנים לו את ההזדמנות, הרבה בזכות קרן היסוד והתרומות שאנשים טובים נותנים, להתחנך, לגדול ולהיות יום אחד מן הימים רופא, פרופסור באוניברסיטה, רב, מדען או אלוף בצה"ל. בלעדיכם התורמים היה קשה למדינת ישראל להתמודד עם האתגר הזה ולהבטיח שאנחנו לאורך זמן נממש את החלום שלנו להקים מדינה בטוחה ובית לעם היהודי.
The Aliyah is the new blood that have to be constantly injected to make us better people. And in order to make us better people, we need Aliyah.
The majority of Israelis, in one way or the other, are either Olim themselves or descendants of Olim. And this is the power of the state. It's a major force.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
The Israel Allies Foundation is one of the most important pro-Israel organizations in the United States and around the world. Thanks to the Israel Allies Foundation, its parliamentary caucuses, and our Christian friends and partners around the world, the bond between our faiths has never been stronger.
I just want to begin by saying thank you to the Israel Allies Foundation for bringing us together from near and far to say with one voice, America stands with Israel.
The Israel Allies Foundation is ensuring a better future for Israel, America, and the rest of the world.
Thank you all for being Israel's allies.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El-Rom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.